Picture this. A highly successful tech CEO is sitting in a darkened hotel room, and she's staring at a bottle of sleeping pills, completely ready to end it all.
Which is just a brutal image to start with.
Yeah, it really is. And it's not because she failed, right? It's because her massive success was built on a foundation that is now actively destroying her mind. I mean, she built this incredible company from her dorm room, became this absolute industry titan, and now she's facing this hostile, jealousy-fueled takeover from her own investors.
Right, from the people she trusted.
Exactly. And the cruelty of it has just pushed her to the absolute brink.
And, what's fascinating here is that it's a profound opening image because it immediately shatters that illusion we all hold about external success. We just assume that reaching the top of the mountain, insulates you from despair.
Yeah, you think you're safe up there.
Right. But for this entrepreneur, the mountain is literally collapsing under her. She has all the markers of societal achievement, yet she is experiencing total internal devastation.
Okay, let's unpack this, because today we are exploring a really unique narrative-driven blueprint for personal mastery and extreme productivity. We are diving into the frameworks hidden within excerpts of Robin Sharma's The 5 a.m. Club.
Such an interesting approach to the topic.
It really is. But our mission for this deep dive is very specific. We aren't just, rattling off a list of generic productivity hacks. We are analyzing a fable, a literal story about this exhausted entrepreneur, a deeply frustrated artist, and this very quirky, disguised billionaire mentor.
Yeah, disguised is definitely the word for him.
Definitely. And our goal is to extract the exact frameworks they discuss so you can reclaim your focus, escape mediocrity, and build a world-class life. And look, if you are listening to this right now and you've ever felt like your days are completely hijacked by notifications.
So this is all of us, right?
Right, exactly. Or, you have this visceral sense that you are meant for something greater, but you're just trapped in this endless loop of frantic busyness, this deep dive is designed specifically for you.
The underlying mechanism here is how the source material really blends the tactical with the deeply philosophical. I mean, it gives you the actual mechanics of structuring your mornings and your workflow.
The practical stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it grounds it entirely in the why. It forces you to confront the very real pain of unexpressed potential. It asks you to look at the exact cognitive and emotional reasons why you might be actively avoiding your own genius.
So we have this entrepreneur on the brink of taking her own life. And in a last-ditch effort to find some sort of lifeline, she attends this personal optimization conference. And sitting next to her is our other main character, the artist.
He's such a great contrast to her.
Yeah, completely different vibe. He's heavily tattooed. I think one of them even reads, "Rich people are fakers." He is deeply frustrated, and he's just a massive self-saboteur.
Oh, absolutely. He gets in his own way constantly.
Right. He has these Herculean ambitions for his art, but his inner demons just keep him from realizing any of them. So they're both sitting in this cavernous seminar hall, waiting for an 80-year-old guru known as the Spellbinder.
And the Spellbinder is nearing the very end of this fabled career. When he finally takes the stage, he is frail, he's visibly wheezing, but his message is absolutely thunderous. He preaches against a concept he calls the mass mediocritization of society.
Mass mediocritization. I mean, it's a heavy phrase, and honestly, to a skeptical listener, it might sound a bit like, corporate guru speak. What does that actually look like in reality?
Well, it's a fair critique of the jargon, for sure. But the concept is actually very grounded. The Spellbinder is arguing that our culture has engineered an environment where average is heavily incentivized.
And excellence is punished.
Punished by distraction, yeah.
Yeah.
He argues that we are living in a society of cyber zombies. We are relentlessly attracted to our digital devices, addicted to distraction, and just afflicted with chronic interruption. His core message is a massive wake-up call.
He's not pulling any punches.
Not at all. He insists that grueling, unglamorous hard work is an absolute biological and psychological necessity for genius.
And he brings receipts for that, too.
Yeah.
He uses these highly specific historical examples to prove that genius isn't just, like, magic, right? It's endurance.
Right. The endurance is the key.
Yeah, he talks about Charles Darwin studying barnacles. Not exotic Galapagos finches, but barnacles. For 8 agonizing years just to formulate his theory of evolution.
Just staring at barnacles, it's wild.
It is. And he brings up Stephen King working in an industrial laundry facility, living in a rundown trailer, getting so universally rejected that he literally threw the manuscript for Carrie in the trash.
Which is crazy to think about now.
Right. It was his wife, Tabitha, who had to pull it out of the garbage. He mentions Rosa Parks' incredible quiet courage and Vincent van Gogh painting 900 unrecognized works in his lifetime. Van Gogh wasn't driven by applause because there was no applause. He was driven by the instinct to unlock his own creative power.
What those historical examples share is a tolerance for the really uncomfortable, isolating reality of deep work. The Spellbinder is trying to explain why world class begins where your comfort zone ends.
That's a great way to frame it.
He suggests that limitation is not a biological fact. It is a practiced mentality. It's this psychological loop that people run daily until they literally mistake it for objective reality. And he delivers a line to the audience that acts as the thesis for this whole first act. He says, "Your excuses are seducers, your fears are liars, and your doubts are thieves."
Wow, your excuses are seducers. That framing fundamentally changes how you view laziness. It makes me think of the mind as a literal muscle. Like if you put your arm in a cast for 6 months, the muscle doesn't just stay the same.
Right, it shrinks.
Exactly, it actively atrophies. The Spellbinder is warning the audience about letting their internal fire go out in what he calls the hopeless swamps of the not quite. If you aren't actively pushing that psychological muscle against resistance, it is actively shrinking.
And the tragedy is that it shrinks comfortably. The seduction of complacency is that it feels incredibly safe in the short term.
Like wrapping yourself in a warm blanket.
Exactly. But ultimately, it is a brutal trap because it guarantees a long-term life of regret. The Spellbinder is trying to shock them into realizing that stepping into the things that terrify you is the only mechanism for reclaiming the cognitive power you've surrendered to convenience.
I do have to play the skeptic here, though. I mean, is it really fair for him to stand on a stage and call everyday people cyber zombies? Isn't the Spellbinder being a bit harsh, maybe even hopelessly out of touch?
It definitely sounds harsh at first.
Right, because consider how essential technology is to our actual survival today. You can't just throw your smartphone in the ocean and expect to keep your job, pay your mortgage, or know if your kid's school is closing early.
Well, that is the exact tension the source material wrestles with. The argument is not about becoming a Luddite and abandoning technology completely. It is entirely about the hierarchy of control.
Meaning, who's in charge?
Right. Are you mastering the tool, or is the tool mastering your neurochemistry? Intelligently used, technology scales human progress exponentially. But the compulsive misuse of it, the phantom buzzing in your pocket, the endless scrolling for cheap dopamine hits to avoid dealing with a difficult task.
Oh, guilty as charged on that one.
We all are. But that is what the Spellbinder argues causes digital dementia. It relentlessly erodes our cognitive bandwidth. If your attention is fractured across 200 trivial notifications a day, you have zero processing power left for the deep, granular, focused work that produces mastery.
Okay, so it's not the existence of the tool, it's our complete lack of defense mechanisms against the addiction to it.
Exactly.
And this entire philosophy is driven home in a truly shocking way, because right as the Spellbinder is delivering this soaring rhetoric about pushing past your physical and mental limits, his own body just gives out. He physically collapses on stage.
It is a really traumatic scene. He falls hard, a tiny river of blood escapes a cut on his head, his breathing is incredibly shallow, and it looks very likely that he might just die right there on the platform.
Which is terrifying for everyone watching.
Absolutely. This sudden intrusion of mortality acts as the catalyst for the entrepreneur and the artist. It just shatters the passive seminar experience and shakes them completely out of their complacency.
And what happens next pushes the story into completely bizarre territory. The hall is emptying out, the lights are dimming, the paramedics have rushed the guru away, and the entrepreneur and artist are approached by a man who looks completely destitute.
Destitute is almost an understatement.
Right.
The text describes him as having tangled, wild hair, a threatening gray beard, and wearing tattered, terrifically stained clothing. The entrepreneur, who is already highly guarded given the hostile takeover she's facing, she immediately writes him off as a total vagabond who managed to sneak past hotel security.
But the artist, who, has that keen eye for visual detail, notices something that makes zero sense. On the wrist of this man, who looks like he sleeps in an alley, is a massive $100,000 Mayfair-style watch.
Yeah, quite the contradiction.
We're talking a dial the color of a revolver, a stainless steel rim, a custom rubber strap. It is a piece of extreme luxury on a man covered in dirt.
And this introduces us to Stone Riley. He reveals that he's not homeless at all. He is actually a billionaire. And he credits his entire fortune, his immense freedom, and his world-class life directly to the teachings of the Spellbinder.
Specifically, he credits a very precise morning routine.
Right, a routine and a foundational philosophy.
And he doesn't waste any time. Right there in the empty, quiet conference hall, this bizarre billionaire introduces a concept that redefines how we think about self-improvement. Because, we always hear about optimizing our mindset. It's on every podcast, every business book.
Oh, for sure. Mindset is everywhere.
But Stone Riley says mindset is only 25% of the equation. He introduces the 4 interior empires. That's mindset, heart set, health set, and soul set.
This framework is vital because it addresses why so many highly intelligent people fail to execute on their goals. Mindset is simply your psychology, your beliefs, your cognitive framing.
Your thoughts, basically.
Right. But if you only work on your mindset, you are completely ignoring the heart set, which is your emotional life. The billionaire argues that you cannot produce world-class work if your emotional bandwidth is consumed by processing past pain, harboring resentment, or clinging to toxic relationships.
Let's dig into that for a second, because how does a heart set actually impact productivity? If I'm angry at a former business partner, how does that stop me from writing a good piece of code or designing a good product?
Well, think of your brain like a computer's RAM. You only have a finite amount of working memory available on any given day. Repressed anger, unresolved trauma, and emotional volatility, they act like massive background applications running invisibly on your operating system.
Oh, that makes so much sense, like having way too many tabs open.
Exactly. They drain your battery and slow down your processing speed. By actively optimizing your heart set through therapy, journaling, forgiveness, emotional regulation, you are literally freeing up cognitive RAM to apply to your craft.
That is profound. And then he moves to health set, which is physical vitality. He calls health the crown only the ill person can see.
Which is a beautiful way to phrase it.
It really is. If you are exhausted, if your biology is compromised, your brilliance is trapped inside a failing vessel. And finally, there's the soul set, which is your connection to your highest nature, your spirituality, and the legacy you want to leave behind. He argues you cannot have A-level outputs in the world with C-level internal states.
Which naturally leads to his extreme views on environmental curation. The billionaire is adamant that you cannot build an A-level company with C-level performers.
Which makes sense for a business.
Right, but he applies this to every single facet of his life. He only consumes the absolute highest quality food, though he eats very little of it. He only reads the most original, challenging books. He ruthlessly prunes his social circle to only include people who fuel his peace and challenge him to elevate his standards.
So the environment isn't just where he is.
Exactly. He views the environment not as a passive backdrop, but as an active sculptor of our potential.
He also offers a perspective on adversity that just stops the entrepreneur in her tracks. Because remember, she is currently drowning in the tragedy of her company being stolen, and the billionaire looks at her and says, "Tragedy is nature's great purifier."
Such a powerful reframe.
It really is. It burns away the fakeness, the arrogance, and the superficial attachments of the human ego.
It's a radical reframing of her suffering, for sure. He explains that humanity generally operates in 2 halves. The first half of our lives, up to about the half-time point, is almost entirely driven by the ego's search for legitimacy.
Trying to prove ourselves.
Yes, we seek social approval. We try to out-earn our peers. We buy objects to fill internal voids. But tragedy, or the acute realization of our own mortality, forces a right-angle turn. We shift from seeking legitimacy to constructing a meaningful legacy. The operating system changes from less about me to more about we.
But I keep coming back to the visual of this guy. Here's where it gets really interesting, because if he has made this shift, if he values high quality and environmental curation so much, why does a billionaire dress like a vagrant? What is the actual psychological benefit of looking like you live in a dumpster?
It seems completely contradictory, right?
Yeah. To me, it immediately echoes the ancient Greek philosopher Diogenes. Diogenes lived in a literal ceramic jar in the marketplace. He owned nothing except a wooden bowl, and he eventually threw the bowl away when he saw a child drinking from his hands.
That's a great historical parallel.
Thanks. He used voluntary discomfort to make himself completely immune to society's superficial judgments and the fear of losing status.
And that parallel to Diogenes is spot on, because the billionaire explains this practice explicitly. He calls it getting gritty. He engages in voluntary discomfort wearing tattered clothes, fasting for days, sleeping on hard floors, to ensure that his wealth does not soften him.
Almost like a modern Stoic practice.
That's exactly what it is. If you voluntarily subject yourself to the conditions you fear most, you strip those conditions of their terror. By wearing rags in public, he is systematically dismantling his own ego and his dependence on the applause of strangers. He remains grounded.
He's proving to himself that his value isn't his bank account.
Right. He proves that his true power is not tied to his wealth or his wardrobe.
It is a wild level of self-mastery, and he demonstrates his total lack of self-consciousness right in front of them. Mid-conversation, he just drops to the floor of this massive convention center, does a set of one-armed push-ups, holds a plank, and then pops up and starts dancing while chanting, "Own your morning, elevate your life."
Just completely unbothered.
He does not care for a single second what the entrepreneur and the artist think of him.
And paradoxically, it is exactly that unbothered, radically authentic nature that convinces them he isn't crazy. He possesses a type of freedom they're both desperate for.
So they decide to trust him.
Yes, but to truly learn his methodology, he demands they take a massive leap of faith. He invites them to leave their lives behind and travel with him, all expenses paid, to his private compound. But they have to meet him the very next morning at exactly 5 a.m.
So they show up the next morning exhausted, highly skeptical, probably thinking they are about to be scammed. And this gleaming, coal-colored Rolls-Royce glides up to the curb. They are whisked away to a private jet with 5AC painted on the tail standing for the 5 a.m. club, and they're flown across the world to the stunning remote island of Mauritius.
The environmental shift here is critical to the methodology, moving from the cold, clinical, hyper-anxious setting of the conference hall to the overwhelming sensory beauty of Mauritius serves as a massive pattern interrupt for their brains.
Like a hard reset.
Exactly. The text describes the fragrant breezes, the vibrant bougainvillea, the local people who operate on a calm island time. The billionaires intentionally removing them from the triggers of their high-stress, device-addicted environments so their neurochemistry can actually reset.
And the lessons start before they even reach the estate. During the drive from the airstrip, the chauffeur points out a unique geographical feature. It's Peter Both Mountain, which has a peak that looks exactly like an oversized human head.
Such a specific, weird detail.
Yeah, and the chauffeur shares this local legend about a man who discovered a gathering of fairies and angels. They allowed him to watch, but made him swear never to reveal their existence. Of course, he breaks his promise, and as punishment, he is turned to stone, his head swelling to become the peak of the mountain. It's this massive geological monument to the vital importance of honoring one's word.
That theme of unyielding honor and discipline is immediately operationalized when the chauffeur hands the entrepreneur and artist 2 handcrafted gold tablets. Engraved on these tablets are the 5 rules of the 5 a.m. club.
And these are not just your average productivity tips.
No, they are the foundational psychological laws required to survive the transformation they are about to undergo.
Let's look closely at these 5 rules because they are pretty uncompromising. Rule 1. An addiction to distraction is the end of your creative production. Empire makers take 1 hour for themselves before dawn to prepare for a world-class day.
Setting the baseline right there.
Right. Rule 2. Excuses breed no genius. Just because you haven't installed the habit before doesn't mean you can't start now. Rule 3, and we heard this one on the index card earlier, all change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end.
That one is so important.
Yeah, it really sticks with you. Rule 4. To have the results the top 5% of producers have, you must start doing what 95% of people are unwilling to do. As you live like this, the majority will call you crazy. And finally, Rule 5. When you feel like surrendering, continue. Triumph loves the relentless.
If we break down the underlying mechanisms of these rules, they serve as a really specific roadmap for defeating the brain's natural resistance to change. Rule 1 targets our environmental reality. Rule 2 attacks that narrative of learned victimhood. But Rule 3 is perhaps the most scientifically vital.
The one about change being messy.
Yes. Saying all change is hard at first is not just some, motivational platitude. It is a biological fact regarding neuroplasticity.
Let's clarify that for everyone. Why is rewiring the brain physically messy and painful?
Because forming a new habit requires forging new neural pathways. When you execute a new behavior like, say, waking up at 5 a.m. instead of 7 a.m., your brain has to insulate that new neural pathway with a fatty substance called myelin.
Okay, myelination.
Right. This process of myelination requires a massive amount of metabolic energy. Your brain literally interprets this energy expenditure as exhaustion, stress, and friction. It feels messy and painful because your biology is actively resisting the calorie burn required to change.
Wow, so it's a physical resistance, not just mental.
Exactly. Knowing this mechanism prevents you from quitting because you realize the pain isn't a sign of failure. It is the physical sensation of your brain upgrading.
That actually makes the messy middle something to strive for rather than avoid. But I have to push back hard on Rule 4.
Okay, let's hear it.
To have the results of the top 5%, you must do what the 95% are unwilling to do, and as a result, people will call you crazy. If I go back to my corporate job or my friend group and start acting completely differently, refusing to engage in gossip, leaving events early to sleep, being hyper-focused, my peers and my spouse are going to think I've lost my mind.
Oh, without a doubt.
So isn't intentionally becoming a pariah an incredibly lonely way to live? I mean, how does a person sustain that isolation without becoming deeply depressed?
Well, it is a deeply isolating reality,
Yeah.
and the philosophy does not sugarcoat it at all. When you elevate your personal standards, you inherently create friction with anyone who is comfortably committed to mediocrity.
Because you make them look bad by comparison.
Exactly. Your growth acts as a mirror that reflects their complacency, and human beings usually respond to that reflection with hostility or mockery. So how do you sustain it? This is exactly why the billionaire was so absolute about environmental curation.
Oh, right, the associations.
Yes, you cannot sustain the habits of the 5% if you remain emotionally dependent on the validation of the 95%. You must actively seek out new associations, mentors, peers, historical figures, through books, who operate at your new frequency. You essentially have to mourn the loss of your old circle and intentionally build a new one.
So you have to accept the loneliness as a sort of temporary tax on your future growth.
A temporary tax, exactly.
And speaking of mentors who understand this path, this perfectly sets up the massive plot twist waiting for our characters on the billionaire's private beach in Mauritius. They walk down to the pristine white sand and they see a figure standing by the water's edge, perfectly still.
Just staring out at the ocean.
Right. They walk up, the artist taps the man on the shoulder, the man turns around.
Yeah.
And it is the spellbinder.
Surprise. He didn't die on stage.
No, he is fully recovered, he looks healthy, tanned, and vibrant. And it is revealed that the spellbinder is actually the billionaire's longtime mentor and peak performance coach. They have been working together in secret since Stone Riley was just 33 years old.
And you can imagine the release the characters feel is just immense.
Oh, huge.
I know.
But the spellbinder, completely unbothered by the fact that they thought he was dead, immediately drops back into teaching mode, standing right there on the beach. He breaks down a concept that completely reorients how we view success. It's the stark difference between fake power and true power.
This distinction is the bedrock of enduring leadership. The spellbinder explains that fake power is derived entirely from external variables. You know, your job title, your net worth, the size of your house, your follower count, societal applause.
All the stuff we're taught to chase.
Right. Our modern civilization programs us from childhood to pursue these metrics. But the inherent danger of fake power is its extreme fragility. Because it depends on external factors, it can be stripped from you instantly.
Like the CEO losing her company.
Exactly. If a board fires you, if a market crashes, if public opinion shifts, your power evaporates overnight. It reveals itself as an illusion.
So what does this all mean? To build on the analogy we touched on earlier, fake power is like renting the penthouse suite in a luxury high-rise. It looks incredible, everyone who visits is deeply impressed, the view is spectacular, but you don't own the deed.
Right, you're just a tenant.
The landlord can evict you tomorrow, and you are left with nothing on the street. True power, on the other hand, is like owning the concrete foundation of the building. It isn't flashy, nobody's taking pictures of it for social media, but you own it. No one can take it away.
I love that.
Yeah.
To take your penthouse analogy even further, when you rely on fake power, you are constantly looking out the penthouse window, terrified of what your neighbors are doing, terrified the landlord is coming. You live in a state of high-grade anxiety.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. True power means you are down in the dirt, pouring more concrete. As the spellbinder defines it, true power is derived from your internal character, your original gifts, and virtues like self-discipline, absolute honesty, and profound empathy. It is an inside job.
An inside job, I like that.
And the ultimate expression of true power is contribution. He quotes the Sufi mystic Rumi. He says, "Give up the drop, become the ocean." The goal shifts from accumulating resources to protect your fragile ego to unlocking immense value for the rest of humanity.
And he uses these incredible, stark historical examples to illustrate this. He talks about Mahatma Gandhi, who died with roughly 10 total possessions to his name: his sandals, his pocket watch, his glasses, a simple bowl.
10 possessions. That's stunning.
Yeah, and he mentions Mother Teresa, who carried all of her worldly goods in a single white cloth bag. They possessed ultimate true power. They had the capacity to influence millions of people, topple empires, and alter the course of human history while possessing absolutely zero fake power.
However, the billionaire, Stone Riley, steps in to introduce a necessary, sobering counterweight to this pursuit of world-class mastery. He introduces a concept he calls the dark side of genius.
This was one of the most unexpected parts of the text for me.
Yeah, but it's vital because it removes the romanticism from greatness. The premise is that every single human gift comes with the proportional shadow side, the exact psychological traits that make someone a master at their craft: an obsessive, relentless focus, a willingness to isolate themselves for months at a time, a demand for absolute perfectionism.
A cold ability to ignore all criticism.
Yes, those are the exact same traits that can make their personal lives a catastrophic disaster. In their homes, they are often perceived as rigid, emotionally unavailable, difficult, and wildly unbalanced. The very machinery that makes you a genius in the studio or the boardroom can devastate your family life if left unchecked.
It is the brutal shadow side of the 5 rules. Like, if you are ruthlessly dedicated to doing what 95% of people are unwilling to do, your spouse or your closest friends might be part of that 95%, and that creates massive, sometimes insurmountable friction.
Precisely. And this explains the billionaire's reliance on the Spellbinder's coaching. To manage this volatile psychology, Stone Riley operates with what he calls the 2x3x mindset.
The 2x3x mindset. Break that down for us.
The formula is simple but grueling. To double your income and your impact, that's the 2x, you must triple your investment in 2 core areas, that's the 3x. Those areas are your personal mastery and your professional capability. You need world-class support systems, coaching, and deliberate calibration to manage the dark side of genius, otherwise it will absolutely consume you.
Calibration. That is the perfect word. To avoid burning down your personal life while building your professional empire, you need immense calibration. And to build this unshakable foundation, the billionaire reveals a very specific, highly granular approach to how we process our daily work.
And this lesson takes place the next morning, right at 5 a.m. on the beach.
Naturally.
Naturally. And he delivers it with his usual flair. He literally points to a glass bottle floating in the surf. He wades in, pulls it out, and inside the bottle is a piece of silk detailing the 3-step success formula.
The formula itself sounds deceptively simple at first. Step 1, learning, which leads to better awareness. Step 2, implementation, which leads to better choices. Step 3, income, which leads to better results.
It does sound pretty rudimentary.
Right.
But the billionaire explains that the magic is not in the words themselves, but in the shift from a mindset of superficiality to a mindset of granularity. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this shift is how an individual or a company gains a GCA, a gargantuan competitive advantage.
Okay, I have to act as the skeptical proxy again here. Gargantuan competitive advantage sounds like something a middle manager yells during a quarterly earnings call. I mean, what does this shift from superficiality to granularity actually mean when you sit down at your desk on a Tuesday?
Well, it means refusing to operate like the 95%. The billionaire explained that the vast majority of people operate with superficiality. They mail it in. They take the path of least resistance.
Doing just enough not to get fired.
Exactly. The top 5%, however, operate with granularity. They sweat the absolute most minuscule details. They possess a depth and a rigor that borders on the obsessive. Because vague, imprecise thinking yields vague, imprecise results.
And he uses that crazy racing example here.
Yes, a stunning example from the world of Formula One racing. He was invited to visit an F1 pit crew. After the car roared into the pit, had its tires changed in under 2 seconds, and sped away, the billionaire watched the crew bring out an industrial vacuum to meticulously clean the asphalt of the pit area.
Vacuuming a racetrack, it sounds like absolute madness.
It looks like madness to the superficial mind. But when he asked the crew chief why they did it, the chief explained that if even a single microscopic molecule of sediment got sucked into the engine intake on the next pit stop, it could destroy the engine.
Oh, wow.
It could cost them a multi-million-dollar race, or worse, cost a driver's life. That is granularity. He contrasts this with the tragedy of the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, which investigators found was caused by the failure of a single 70-cent rubber O-ring. A horrific, catastrophic loss of life caused by a flaw in a seemingly insignificant detail that was overlooked.
That really puts it in perspective, and he applies this outside of engineering, too. He talks about the culinary and art worlds. He mentions Vermeer, the legendary Dutch painter, who would obsessively experiment with painting techniques for months just to make natural light look three-dimensional on a canvas.
The dedication is just unbelievable.
And he brings up the CEO of Moncler, the luxury fashion brand. When asked what his favorite food was, the CEO didn't name some complex delicacy. He said spaghetti pomodoro. It is literally just pasta, tomatoes, olive oil, and basil. But the CEO noted that because it is so simple, getting the calibration and the balance of those four ingredients correct requires uncommon granular expertise. There's nowhere to hide poor quality.
And the overarching thesis here is that your output is the physical manifestation of your self-respect. Those with high personal esteem wouldn't dare send out a piece of work that is merely average.
Right.
But strategically, the billionaire argues that a gargantuan competitive advantage exists simply because there is virtually no traffic on the extra mile. There's intense, cutthroat competition at the level of ordinary. But if you apply granularity, if you sweat the details, you essentially remove all competition. The field is yours alone.
I understand the theory, but let's pressure test this against reality. This level of granularity, vacuuming the pit lane, obsessing over the light on a canvas, sounds utterly exhausting. How do you apply this F1 pit crew mentality when you are a mid-level manager drowning in 150 emails, endless Slack messages, and back-to-back Zoom meetings? I can't vacuum the pit lane of my inbox. If I obsess over the granularity of every email, I will literally get fired for moving too slowly.
That is a brilliant point, and it's the exact pushback the modern worker faces. But the billionaire's answer is counterintuitive. Less is more. You cannot be granular about everything.
So you have to pick your battles.
Yes. If you try to do it with everything, you will burn out immediately. You must ruthlessly narrow your focus. He tells them, simplify, streamline everything, become a purist. You cannot deliver F1 level quality on 50 different projects. You must concentrate on just a few vital work projects and make them astonishingly great, rather than diluting your cognitive bandwidth across dozens of mediocre ones. You have to stop managing your time and start managing your focus.
Stop managing time, start managing focus. That reframing requires a lot of courage because it means saying no to a lot of seemingly urgent things. And this narrowing of focus introduces the final major framework they discuss on the beach, the focuses of history makers.
The billionaire shares a new model to help them direct this newly found focus, and we're going to look specifically at the two main pillars of it today. The first is Focus 1, Capitalization IQ. This is a concept originally coined by the eminent psychologist James Flynn.
This concept completely flipped my understanding of talent. For my whole life, I assumed the people at the top were just born with bigger engines. But Capitalization IQ says it is not about the natural talent you were born with. It is entirely about how much of that baseline potential you actually actualize.
Yes.
The billionaire states flatly that relentless dedication and discipline will beat natural brilliance every single day of the week.
And the science supports him. What's crucial here is how he breaks down the psychology of why so many brilliant people fail to capitalize on their potential. It comes down to two interlocking psychological traps, the self-fulfilling prophecy and learned victimhood.
How do those work together?
Well, from childhood, we subconsciously adopt limiting narratives. Maybe a teacher said we weren't good at math, or a parent said we aren't creative. Because we run that mental program, we don't put in the grueling, granular hours of practice required to achieve mastery. And because we don't put in the hours, our results remain ordinary, which then validates our faulty story. We prove our own limitations correct.
It's the classic analogy of the circus elephant, but let's really look at how sinister that programming is. When a circus elephant is a baby, trainers tie its leg to a heavy iron stake driven deep into the ground. The baby pulls and pulls, but it can't break free. It learns that the rope means absolute limitation.
It internalizes that boundary.
Exactly. So when that elephant grows into a massive 5-ton adult, they can tie it to a tiny plastic lawn chair with a flimsy piece of twine. The elephant has the physical power to shatter the chair and walk away instantly. But its early programming convinces it that it is permanently trapped. It suffers from learned victimhood.
And the human tragedy is that the pain of this unexpressed potential doesn't just vanish because we choose to ignore it, it metastasizes. The billionaire explains that when we betray our true capabilities, a part of our soul actually starts to die. We feel a deep, low-grade anguish.
But we don't want to feel that.
No, the human brain cannot tolerate constant anguish, so we subconsciously develop escape routes to numb the pain of our own mediocrity.
Which brings us directly to focus 2, freedom from distraction. The billionaire warns of what he calls broken focus syndrome, and he explains the actual neuroscience behind why we sabotage ourselves, which is wild.
Yes, it is driven by the amygdala. As you get closer to your own genius, as you sit down to do work that might truly stand out and elevate you into that top 5%, your amygdala, the brain's ancient fear center, fires up.
Because standing out is dangerous.
Exactly. Evolutionarily, standing out from the tribe meant risking isolation, and isolation meant death by starvation or predators. So your brain perceives the pressure of greatness as a literal, mortal threat. To avoid the terrifying anxiety of doing great work, your brain urges you to escape into meaningless, safe distractions.
Think about this in your own life right now. If you're listening, think about the last time you sat down to tackle a really difficult, high-stakes project that could advance your career. Did you suddenly feel an overwhelming, urgent need to check your email, scroll through social media, or, I don't know, get up and clean your kitchen?
It happens to all of us.
It does. That wasn't just laziness. That was your amygdala screaming at you to run away from the danger of excellence. You do the busy work to avoid the real work.
Exactly. And the billionaire grounds all of this neurological theory in the ultimate inescapable reality check, which is human mortality. He quotes the Stoic philosopher Seneca on the shortness of life, but he brings it into the modern era by talking about Eugene O'Kelly, right, the former CEO of KPMG who wrote Chasing Daylight. O'Kelly was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer and suddenly had to schedule his final walks and conversations with his loved ones, calculating exactly how many hours of life he had left.
So sobering. He also mentions Jean-Dominique Bauby. Bauby was the vibrant editor-in-chief of French Elle magazine, who suffered a massive stroke that left him with locked-in syndrome. He was entirely paralyzed, completely lucid inside his own mind, but unable to move anything except his left eyelid.
Unimaginable.
And he painstakingly wrote a profound memoir, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, by having someone recite the alphabet while he blinked his left eyelid to select each letter over 200,000 times.
The billionaire is urgently trying to convey the terrifying fragility of time. He uses these extreme examples of O'Kelly and Bauby to shatter the illusion that we have an endless supply of tomorrows. He wants the entrepreneur and the artist to understand that life is far too short to waste your cognitive RAM on trivial pursuits, toxic resentments, and digital distractions.
He shares a quote from Pablo Picasso that perfectly sums up the antidote to the circus elephant conditioning, the cure for capitalization IQ. Picasso said, "My mother said to me, if you are a soldier, you will become a general. If you are a monk, you will become the Pope. Instead, I was a painter and became Picasso."
What a quote.
Right. That is the ultimate rejection of external limitations. That is supreme true power.
It is the absolute embodiment of radical self-belief, but crucially, it is combined with rigorous, granular execution. Believing you are Picasso isn't enough. You have to actually paint the 900 unrecognized canvases.
You have to do the work.
Right. And breaking this negative programming, resetting the hyperactive amygdala, and dedicating yourself to the quiet, lonely work of granularity is exactly what the 5 a.m. morning routine is mathematically designed to facilitate.
And that brings us full circle on this journey. We've moved from the very real danger of being a cyber zombie, hypnotized by screens and drained of all cognitive bandwidth, to understanding the absolute, uncompromising necessity of granularity, sweating the small stuff like a Formula One pit crew.
It's a huge shift.
It is. We've explored the 3-step success formula, realizing that better awareness inevitably leads to better choices, which produce better results. And we've looked at the brutal neuroscience of how our own brains actively push us toward distraction to protect us from the scary, isolating reality of our own greatness.
It is not simply a blueprint for doing better work at the office. It is a comprehensive architectural plan for becoming a fundamentally more powerful, calibrated, and resilient human being.
So to you listening right now, tomorrow morning, the sun is going to rise. It always does. The only variable is you. The question is, will you let your phone own your first waking hour? Will you let your amygdala push you into the soft, familiar comfort of distraction? Or will you claim your victory hour, step willingly into the messy, painful middle of neuroplasticity, and start finally capitalizing on your true potential?
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, unexplored thread from the text to consider on your own. Early on the beach, the billionaire mentioned something fascinating about his childhood. His father was a farmer, a profession built entirely on waking up before dawn.
Okay.
But surprisingly, his father actually let him sleep in. He let him be a teenager. He let him be a rebel, rather than forcing him to wake up early and work the fields.
That is surprising for a farmer.
Right. So consider this. Did the father's refusal to force discipline actually allow the billionaire to choose it willingly later in life? Perhaps our own past resistance to routine, our own messy rebellions and failed schedules, weren't failures at all? Perhaps they were just necessary phases of our evolution, preparing us to finally embrace discipline on our own terms when we were truly ready to own it.
Wow, that is an incredible reframing. Your past rebellion might be the very fuel required for your future discipline. You had to reject it then to choose it now. Well, okay, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Set those alarms, folks. Prepare for your own 5 a.m. wake up call, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.